lot going on in this session, and I just want to kind of walk through some of the things that I did and why I did them. So obviously the way I've got things arranged, the tracks arranged are drums, bass, piano, guitar, horns. The room mics, we happen to have a stereo pair of mics just capturing kind of the whole room. I've got all these aux tracks here, and then I've got some verb, reverb, delay, and then I've got this thing I'm calling PB for print bus, and then this audio track called 2-track. So I'm just going to walk through what everything is and why I do it that way. And all of this is personal preference, and there's really no right or wrong way to set things up. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is the way I kind of set up a session, particularly for mixing. But obviously, a lot of this was done during the recording process. But so I like to have the rhythm section first, drums and bass. If there's piano and guitar, I'll kind of follow with those. Typically for drums, in a session you would have kick, snare, hi-hat, toms, overheads. Well, the mics I used one on the kick, I used 2 on the snare, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. And I did that so that on the top head you get some of that snap, but then the bottom you get the actual snare, and then I can get a blend of the two. The overheads, I could have made a stereo track for this, but I decided to record them as 2 mono tracks and just pan them left and right. I did that because the one channel was a little hotter, one side was a little hotter than the other, whether it's because the snare or the hi-hat, I don't remember which was which, or what was causing it mostly, but I wanted them to be more matched left and right as far as the level. So instead of making one stereo track and having one side be louder than the other, I split them into mono. That way I could adjust the levels individually. And because of that, I made this stereo aux track for the overheads because I wanted to EQ and compress them a little bit. And I didn't want to have to do that twice. I didn't want to have to have 2 EQ plugins and 2 compressor plugins. So I bussed, instead of going out 1 and 2, right, I went to a bus that I named overheads, or OH for overheads. Bus these tracks to the overheads, to this aux, and then I can do my processing, my EQ, not much EQ there, and my compression, and do that just in one instance rather than in 2. And I wanted to also compress and EQ. Actually, I didn't really use this EQ, did I? A little bit of roll off on the low end, but that was about it. But again, then I could process all the drums, compress the whole drum kit. Now I did a little on the kick, did a little bit of compression, EQ the snare top, EQ the snare bottom. But then I still bust everything to this drums track so I could just compress it all a little bit more. Now the drums are going to this, they're going out a bus that I'm calling PB for print bus, which is this track way down here. So everything eventually comes to this print bus track, where I again have a limiter just for a mastering, just an overall limiter on it, no EQ, and then this is just a frequency analyzer. So this allows you to see your frequency spectrum. So I've got a little bit of a dip overall, about 4 to 6K, 4 to 8K. It's not throughout the whole tune, but I just do that so I have a visual representation of what's going on in the frequency spectrum. And then all of that, so everything's coming to this print bus, and then it's being bussed to this audio track that I'm calling 2-track, and that's where I'm actually recording. Well, it's not here. Guess I didn't bounce this one yet. But so when I do, I'm going to record all of this to this 2-track and then export it from there. So in between, you can see I've got my bass DI. This is just a single track. Bass was direct. Got some EQ, compression, and then a touch more EQ after that. I do that I kind of get the EQ set how I want it, where I feel like it's sounding good. Then I compressed it, just to, especially for the bass because it's direct. I want all the notes to really be kind of in the same dynamic range, especially for something like the bass. So compress it, and then after that, because compressing is gonna enhance, it's gonna all the EQ I did before the compressor was just cutting frequencies. If I were to have boosted frequencies, then that compressor after the fact would have really brought those frequencies up even louder in the mix. So I do all my cutting of frequencies before, then I compress, and then if I need to give something a little boost, like here I boosted the lows on this EQ, it's at 220 hertz. I boosted that a little bit. I didn't want to do it before the compression because then it would be a little too overwhelming. Piano, again, I made those as 2 mono tracks, left and right, going to a stereo aux, this piano bus track. And again, just by looking at it, I can tell that the right side was recorded a little softer. They're probably just a little heavier on the left hand than the right hand, but for the mix purposes, I wanted to have them more even. So I was able to, oh yeah, I've got some automation on there. So you can see how this track on the left-hand side, it's a little hotter. So by adjusting those, kind of bring them even in the mix. I'm not really sure what's going on with the automation here, to be honest. Let's see what happened. Okay. I've got a whole lot of moods going on. Don't remember doing all that. But for whatever reason, it sounded good at the time. And that's actually a great place to end this. I mean, looking at some of the EQs I have, right? Like some of this stuff you might be looking at and going, what the heck is going on here, right? Well, it doesn't matter to me what the heck the EQ graphic looks like or what the automation looks like. Definitely looks a little unconventional, right? But I care about how it sounds. Whoops. And I mean, that's our job. As an audio engineer, your job is to make it sound good. Doesn't matter what the plugin looks like or what the waveform looks like. If it sounds good, at the end of the day, that's all that matters.